My advice really is not to give up. I think that a lot of times as a writer, you almost have imposter syndrome. You feel like if you haven't been published, that you're not really a writer. And you are a writer. If you're writing, you're trying to write a book, you're a writer. And you have to just keep at it and don't give up. Because once you give up, of course, you're never going to be a writer, right? I mean, you have to just keep going. That's my advice. And write like no one else is reading it. You write your first draft, just keep going. Don't worry about who's reading, who's critiquing, anything. Just write. And you could be successful if you just don't give up.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. So happy to have everyone back. Jane is with me today, and a big Bruce Springsteen fan, which I just found out before we hit record, which is cool. Jane is here joining me to talk about her books and all the great stuff going on. And I'm talking about all things authorship. Jane, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm so happy to be here.
And when we met for our little pre-chat, you let me look out your window out into the world, and I got to see some amazing New York skyline, which made me so happy. So thank you for doing that. I love New York. Tell everybody kind of where in New York you are.
I live in the South Street Seaport right now, currently, and I look out over the Brooklyn Bridge, which is what I showed Dave. But I've lived all over the city, really, over the years. Upper East Side, Soho, the Village, where I am now. So I have a real good idea of the whole place.
Nice. What keeps you in New York? What is it about it for you?
I think the busyness, as a writer, there's just always something that inspires me. Even riding on the subway is so inspiring, talking to people from all over the world. The food, the museums, the being able to go to shows when you want to. It's invigorating.
I love it. And what I like too is I would go to one area and it would be one group from one part of the world. You'd cross the street and you're in a totally different world. Like, it's like right across the road from each other. It's so amazing to see how all these different cultures all blended together, working together. It's a great picture of how things should be, I think.
Yes, it's quite a beautiful place, and everyone does meld together. And it's true, you go in one direction, and you could be in Chinatown, another direction for Little Italy, and uptown, you could be in Harlem, and it's just very culturally diverse. Obviously, it's a melting pot, and it's a beautiful way to live among so many other people.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, let's talk about your author journey. Tell me, you were kind of writing in one avenue, one genre, one area, and you kind of moved over to writing into what you're doing today. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about the change that happened there for you?
Sure. I was a screenwriter. I took classes and I learned how to become a screenwriter, sold my very first screenplay, and I was very happy with it all. And then I started wanting to take more ownership of my work, and a story came to mind, and I decided to write it as a novel. Because screenwriting is much more collaborative. When you're a novelist, it's yourself and an editor. And screenwriting, there's just so many people involved, which is interesting, but I wanted more control, and wrote my first novel, and I haven't looked back.
Nice. Okay, let's talk.
Great experience.
Let's talk about your novel. What is the name of your book? And give us all a little insight behind what's between those chapters.
Okay, my book right now that I'm promoting and loving is called On Fire Island.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's the story of a book editor named Julia Morse, who lived and breathed stories and found herself at 37 to have cancer and a few months to live. And after she passes away, it sounds sad, promise you it's not. She spends the summer on Fire Island with her husband, Ben, as a spirit, let's say, and watches over him and watches over the community and her friends and all the crazy things that go on in the small town. And it's actually a very uplifting look at death and at mourning. And people have been writing to me left and right, telling me how inspiring it was and how much they laughed, which is like life, right? Things, just because someone dies, things that are funny still happen, and life still goes on. And as much as you're bereaved, you still have to live your life. And that's kind of what it's about.
So there had to be a seed somewhere that sparked the idea to write this. Take us back to that moment where it's like you saw this kind of unfolding for you. What was the starting point?
Well, I've always wanted to set a book in Fire Island because I love it so much. So we live in the city in the winter and we live in Fire Island in the summer. And I think that most books I write do start with a very specific seed. This one, I think, really just started from watching the baseball games. We live near the softball field. The guys play on Saturdays and Sundays. The women play on Monday nights. The kids play in the mornings. And just sitting there and watching these guys really play and the way they speak to each other and the way they get along and the way they rib each other and the names and everything. I said, this is the most beautiful community for a book. And that's kind of how it started. It also started in a funny way because when we bought our house in Fire Island, people to this day, even really, and we've been there for like 30 years, refer to it as the person who used to own the house. Like they say, oh, isn't that Alan Silver's house? Alan Silver hasn't owned the house in 30 years, but everybody always refers to it by the previous owner. And it's such a comical, unusual thing to me. And that, if you read the book, you'll see there's a whole shtick about, people claiming it's their house when it's not, when it's already been sold to the next person. And it's just there's a lot of funny things about the island. And that's one of them that I just think is quirky and needed to be in a book.
Was there anything that you took out of the book in the editing stage that you wished you hadn't?
There's nothing I took out of the book that I wished I hadn't, but there are things like so the book came out a few weeks ago and I've been out to the beach and I didn't realize how many people would be asking me, is this person? Is this that person? Yeah. So that maybe I would have taken more care in, differentiating who's real, who's not real, because it's all not real. You know what I mean? So it's all fiction, but of course you write what you know. So it's kind of like an amalgamation of different people. But I don't know. I may have done it a little differently if I knew so many people would be questioning who's who.
Is there a book signing coming up on Fire Island at all to kick this all off? Yes.
So Fire Island is this long island. And it's about, I think 23 miles long. And in it, there are 17 different communities.
Wow.
And there are no cars except for police vehicles and things like that. Yeah. So traveling from town to town, you have to take a water taxi or you have to walk along the beach or you ride your bicycle. But even that, you have to stop and look through the sand. It doesn't connect well. So I'm going to a bunch of different towns. I'm going to my town. I'm going to have a talk. And then there's a town called Fair Harbor that I'm going to, Dunewood, Kismet, Saltaire. There's all these different towns.
Nice.
So it's going to be a lot of fun going to different towns, seeing what they're all different from each other. They just are. I mean, partially because there aren't cars. So you just basically stay amongst your own town or maybe the one next door. So it's going to be fun.
What a different world than New York then. Like, talk about a dichotomy there. Like, oh my God.
That's so true. You just said how here we mix and there we kind of don't. Very true.
Yeah. Yeah. And then just the traffic and the busyness of New York and cars everywhere, bumper to bumper,
and no
honking horns,
right?
And zero.
When my kids were young, we used to spend 3 months there straight, June, July, August. I have 3 little girls. Well, now they're grown. But yeah, I used to spend June, July, and August. And when I get back to New York City, I'd have to hold their hands, especially the youngest, because I feel like they would just run into the street because they just didn't know any differently. They were so used to just running around. So it was very funny.
So with this book now behind you, and it just came out, that's amazing. Talk a little bit to a new author listening about their writing journey. Any advice that you have for them now that you've got to this point in your writing career?
My advice really is not to give up. I think that a lot of times as a writer, you almost have imposter syndrome. You feel like if you haven't been published, that you're not really a writer. And you are a writer. If you're writing, you're trying to write a book, you're a writer, and you have to just keep at it and don't give up, because once you give up, of course, you're never going to be a writer, right? I mean, you have to just keep going. That's my advice. And write like no one else is reading it. You write your first draft, just keep going. Don't worry about who's reading, who's critiquing, anything. Just write. And you could be successful if you just don't give up.
What point did it feel extremely real to you as a writer that this happened? Like, it's done. Like, it's actually a thing in the world. Was it getting a copy of the book? What point was it for you that everything kind of just went, I did it. I'm done.
I this is going to sound crazy, but I don't know if I really feel, even at this point,
really,
4 books in, bunch of screenplays.
Yeah.
I still somehow want to like wake up and say, what? This is crazy. I guess I have to stop and look. Sometimes if I put the books next to each other in a pile, then I would say, wow, look what I accomplished. But in general, I feel like, I don't know. I don't really let it sink in as much as I probably should. And I think that's the case with everything in life. People don't stop to enjoy their accomplishments as much as they should.
What kind of plans do you have beyond going around and being in your community and just doing some book signings and stuff? What other ways are you going to celebrate the fact that you've crossed this milestone for yourself?
Well, I'm going on vacation.
Yes.
I'm going on vacation, which is going to be really great. We're going to Norway and Sweden, and I'm very excited. We're seeing Bruce Springsteen, as you said before. Mm-hmm. So that is a huge celebration for me. I think my biggest joy is when people write to me and say that the book meant a lot to them, especially with this book, because there's a healing element to it. And I think that that's my biggest celebration, when someone will reach out and really loves the book. Strangers that reach out, friends, anything. That's what really makes me feel great.
Any feedback that you've received that really kind of made you think or just caught you off guard a little bit from somebody who's read the book?
Yes, there was something the other day, and I can't really explain it because it was a spoiler. But she was really strong. I mean, a stranger on, people write whatever they want on Amazon and Goodreads with little, thought, I think, to the author that's reading it. I don't think that they realize that the author looks at the Amazon review and the Goodreads reviews, or maybe they do and they don't care, but sometimes they're a little harsh. And someone was just, Julia I told you, Julia dies. Yeah. Right. And they were saying, I can't say it because it'll give it away, but whatever it is, I was really taken back. But, everyone doesn't think like I think or like you think. The world is obviously filled with very diverse opinions. And, it's almost feels good. Okay, someone didn't like it. That's good. I don't really care anymore. I used to feel really badly. For my second book, Eliza Starts a Rumor, someone once left a review that just said oof. And oof. And like, what, did it go to their house and be like, could you elaborate on this oof? And I knew it was like a bad thing, oof, right? And I thought about that more than all the good reviews. I thought about that oof so much more, because you think of, it's easier to hear the bad things sometimes. But yeah, reviews are quite a trip for writers.
They're important though, right?
They're important because there's amazing communities of readers who look at the reviews and decide if they want to read a book or not. But I also think that's a little bit dangerous because, as I just said, everyone thinks differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have your screen up right now. I'm reading some of the reviews. on
I have great
Amazon.
reviews on this book. Oh my
Love
God.
it. Oh my gosh.
4.4 out of 5.
Deborah Ball, okay? She says,
Mhm.
all of Rosen's books are winners, but this may be her best. This is not a beachy read, but truly poignant and reveals the afterlife of amazing marriage. I'm loving it. So, like Dr. David Weinstein, I love this book. I couldn't put it down. She is such a fabulous author. Like, come on. Like, it just goes on and on and on, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love when people leave reviews, and I encourage everyone to do that because it does really kind of help other people that are thinking about buying a book to click that add to cart, right? That's what it's all about.
Especially in a world today where there's 5 books that everyone's buying, and it's very hard to get your book out there. And the fact that people could look at Amazon and say, wow, people love this book is a great thing.
Yeah.
It's great.
So
until you write oof.
Until you write oof. Yeah, define the oof. Is that a good oof or a bad oof? I don't know what that is. But it's nice, and I encourage everyone that listens to the show to really consider doing those reviews and sharing your thoughts on the book. I know I had one author came on, and they purposely had a slow burn in the first few chapters of their book because they wanted to build a world around what was going to happen later. And one of the critical reviews was too slow in the beginning. And he's like, that's exactly what I was going for. I wanted it to be slow because I wanted to see the contrast later. But they just focused on the too slow part. But he had a chance to respond, right? So.
Right. Oh, but you're really not. So, when you go to respond on Goodreads, you could respond and not on Amazon. But when you go to, or maybe it's the other way around, but when you go to respond on Goodreads as an author, a little tab comes up and it says, are you sure you want to do this?
Are you sure? Oof. And like you want to challenge the oof?
So you don't do it, right?
Yeah, right?
Because it just said, are you sure? And you're like, I'm not sure. I shouldn't do it. I should just forget it. But, you don't forget it. It's very interesting. I definitely enjoy it. Obviously I enjoy a good review, and obviously a bad review pains me, but it's fine. It's fine. And it's the best when people give stars and write reviews and even spend that time to reach out and tell me they love the book. I mean, that's amazing to me that people spend the time to do that. And it's fantastic. And I love it.
You shared a story with me in our pre-chat, which I told my wife. She had a similar encounter with quite a big name in movies in New York. And you shared a story that made me smile as well about handing a script to a very famous person. And you went through a lot of work to get that through the window. Can you share that story? That was really fun.
Sure. Well, when you live in New York, you see famous people all the time. I could never even count to you how many famous, and I also maybe have that eye that I just notice them a little quicker than other people. I don't know. But yes, you see people all the time, and it's very funny. So one day I'm looking out my window, and I wrote on Fire Island as a script before I wrote it as a book. And I'm looking out my window. I lived in Soho, and I looked down on the corner, and there is Bill Murray. And he actually was filming a movie, and they're on the corner. And I was like, this Bill Murray, if you read my book, there's an older man in my book named Shep, who Bill Murray would be the perfect fit for the character.
Bill, if you're listening,
I ran up and he famously doesn't even have an email or a phone or something. So it's maybe, I don't know which it is. But anyway, I ran upstairs, got the script, ran down. I had like 60 flights of stairs, by the way. Ran down, out on the street. He had gotten into a car. I knocked on the window of the car and I said, this may be the craziest thing you've ever heard, but I wrote this script for you to play the lead. Would you read it? And he said, that wouldn't be the craziest thing I ever heard. And thank you. I'll read it. He took it. And then I proceeded to run back upstairs. I think I invited him for dinner also.
I'm sure I would. Yeah.
And then I ran back up and sat at the window and watched to see if he was reading it for like an hour. And he did read a little bit of it. I never heard from him, but it was very fun. And it was a great story.
Nice. So I wanted to tie that into the book. So as people are reading, they can picture Bill Murray saying those words, right? Because that's
right.
Cool.
Bill Murray, if you're listening.
Come on, Bill.
Call Jane Rosen.
Come on. All the details in the show notes, Bill. You can do this. Reach out. We love you, Bill. Yeah. I love all of his movies, Baby Steps and all that stuff. And I'm sailing. Look at me. I'm sailing. Yeah, I can go on and on. Great. My wife met Bill on the Staten Island ferry coming back from the Statue of Liberty, and they're just filming Ghostbusters. Just finished wrapping up the film, and she got to stand beside Sigourney Weaver and everything. It's so cool to have them right there as just people, like it's amazing. So those interactions mean something. Yeah, they're just people. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I get starstruck, but they are just people.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. I love it.
I know.
And the dedication for you to run that many steps to do that. That was amazing.
It's so funny. My favorite famous person story, I think, was I walked out of the old Barney's, which was on 17th Street, and I just moved to the city, so I wasn't, aware that there was obviously famous people all around the city. And I stepped out of Barney's, and it started to pour. And just as I stepped out, Rod Stewart stepped out too. And he raised his hand and he sang, I can't sing, but he sang taxi. And I was like, oh, and it was the funniest thing. And we just laughed. We were just caught in the rain together, and it was really funny.
See, I could just listen to these stories all day. I love it. It's amazing. Okay, so what's next for you? I know you're going on holidays, everything great. Books come out. We don't want to rush too far into the future, but there's got to be something kind of the title of the podcast, Living the Next Chapter, right? There's another chapter coming. Can you give us any insight on what's coming down the road?
Of course. My next book is called 7 Summer Weekends, and it's going to come out next summer. It's also set in Fire Island, but in honor to the name of your podcast, I will say I am dying to write a play, and I think I'm going to tackle that this year.
Really?
Yes, I may have to take a class or a workshop or something, but I have an idea in my head, and I really have. I mean, I'm a screenwriter originally, but it's very different, supposedly. So I'm going to learn how to write a play, and I'm going to write a play.
I'm so curious to be inside of your head and figure out how you do this, because when I go to see a play or I see a movie or I read a book, I'm seeing the end result of all this. I don't know how it all starts, right? That's where I'm really curious as a reader, as a movie lover, play lover. How this idea kind of comes into your mind. Is it just like a download? Like, can you explain how that works?
I could explain it. I could explain it better with my first novel. I think that really helps explain the process. So I was at an airport coming back from a birthday in Jamaica, and someone that we were traveling with said to me, I have a great idea. I heard a great story. I have a great idea. And usually I don't really want to hear their ideas because I think I'll be working on something and then I'll take it from them. But she was just telling me this great story, and she wasn't a writer. So she tells me a story about a dress that was returned to Bloomingdale's covered in formaldehyde. Yes, That was the story. And that was the spark for my first novel called 9 Women, 1 Dress. So for that, I had the ending, right? The dress is covered in formaldehyde. What happened to that dress? And I took the ending and I worked backwards through 9 different women wearing the same dress from Bloomingdale's until I got to the beginning, which was the fashion show when it first appeared, and the garment center people and the designer and the pattern maker who escaped the Holocaust, in Poland and came to America. And I went from that pattern maker escaping the Holocaust all the way up to the woman, to the dress being covered in formaldehyde.
Wow.
And 8 people in between.
Wow.
So that's the thinking. The spark comes, and then it just molds in your head and molds around, and you just think about it and think about it and think about it until maybe you could write an outline, and once you have the outline and you know that you have, this is the way I work. I know I have a beginning, I have a middle, I have an end. Then I could take a breath and start writing. And I don't necessarily look at that outline very much, or maybe not even ever again, because I just know that I have the pieces and I just hit the ground running from page one.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you ever get stuck in the details at all, where you're like, how much detail do I need? How much is too much to serve the story?
I don't really get stuck in it. I think a lot of that is my editor's job. Like sometimes she'll say to me, you need more description here, or you'll, bulk this up. So I think my first draft is probably, I'm not one to have to cut. I'm more one that has to build. So let's say I'll turn in my first draft and maybe it'll be a little short of pages. And then she'll say, build here, let's hear more about this. Why did this happen? Could you go back here? And that's how it grows into the right amount, just let's say. But for 9 Women, One Dress, I was really short actually. And I ended up, to bring it up to the right length, I ended up adding an entire story. 5 chapters that I then read through the book, which was
really
interesting. Yeah.
That's okay. See, that's what I like to see. Because now when I see the books and when I read the books, I kind of have a vision in my mind of how this came to be. And it kind of helps for me as someone consuming the content to have a better appreciation, I think, for what goes on behind the scenes. Again, because we only see the final product, right?
Right.
It's edited, it's done, it's been tweaked, it's been reviewed and submitted, it's all done. So
yeah.
I like to know what's happening behind the scenes. It's like behind the scenes of a movie being filmed, or, Bill sitting in his car during a movie shoot. That's the stuff you don't get to see.
I know.
There's real life happening there, right?
I know. It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely, I think when you're writing a book, it's daunting. It's definitely daunting when you start. But then all of a sudden, one day, you sit down and you realize you're halfway through.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wow, I'm halfway through. I could do this. It's going to happen. And you get there.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hey, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast and to talk through all this. Where does everybody go to find you? Where are you most active on social media? All that great stuff. So if there's questions and stuff, Instagram? Okay, where do we go?
I think that's my most active place for sure. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on everything. But Instagram is really where you'll see me. You'll see my daily life, my trip to Norway next week.
Nice.
My daughter's Indian wedding. You'll see everything on that Instagram. It's very fun.
Beautiful. And then a website as well? Is there a way to connect with you?
Yes, Jane L. Rosen, author.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
I want to put that in for Bill as well, so he can get in touch with you.
Okay.
In case he's lost your number and he has the script, he wants to get in touch with you. So Bill, if you're listening, reach out to Jane. She's waiting here.
I am waiting.
I love it. Jane, thank you so much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking time for me out of your plans and your packing day and all the stuff you're doing. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you for making time for me, and have a wonderful summer.
All right. Everyone, please go check out all the show notes. Everything's there for Jane, and we'd love for you to go out and pick up On Fire Island and be ready for the next one that's coming. There's so many books to buy. Head over and purchase your books today. Thanks, Jane.
Yes, I promise you'll laugh.
I love it. Perfect. Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show and you for listening this far. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow. Helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.